My name is Sarah Chen, and on the night everything changed, I wore a black dress that cost more than my first month's salary had been. The champagne in my glass was expensive, the kind that tickled your nose with tiny bubbles, but I couldn't taste it. I couldn't taste anything except the bitter flavor of betrayal. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" Richard Blackwood's voice cut through the music and laughter. My boss, no, my former mentor, stood on the stage with his arms spread wide, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile as fake as a plastic rose. I had given this man 10 years of my life, 10 years of 16-hour days, sleepless nights, and brilliant ideas that had transformed Blackwood Industries from a failing business into an empire. $95 million. That's how much profit I had generated for him through my strategies, my deals, my blood and sweat. And I had paid a terrible price. My marriage had crumbled. My husband left me, taking our daughter Emily with him. "You love that company more than you love us," he had said. I told myself it would be worth it when Richard finally made me a partner, when he finally gave me what I had earned. Tonight, I thought, would be that night. 10 years ago, this company was dying, Richard continued, his voice warm and friendly. But we turned it around through hard work and dedication. My hands tightened on the champagne glass. "And now, it's time for the next generation to take the reins," Richard said. "I'm proud to announce that my daughter, Victoria Blackwood, will be taking over as CEO of Blackwood Industries, effective immediately." The room exploded with applause. People cheered and whistled. But I stood frozen, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. My heart sank into a dark, cold place inside my chest. Victoria stepped onto the stage in a white designer dress, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of gold. She was 26 years old and had never worked a real day in her life. She had spent the last 4 years at fancy universities and vacation homes while I built her father's empire. "Thank you, Daddy," Victoria said into the microphone, her voice sweet as poison. "I promise to take this company to new heights." New heights. She didn't know the first thing about running a business. I felt someone watching me and turned to see Victoria staring directly at me from the stage. She smiled a cold, calculating smile that made my skin crawl. In that moment, I knew the truth. She had convinced her father to give her my position. She had stolen my future. I couldn't breathe. The room felt too hot, too crowded. I pushed through the celebration, ignoring the confused looks from my coworkers, and stumbled out onto the balcony. The night air was cool on my flushed skin. Below me, the city stretched out in a sea of lights, indifferent to my pain. I had sacrificed everything for this company, and for what? To be cast aside like garbage. Sarah Chen, isn't it? I turned to find Victoria standing in the doorway, a glass of wine in her perfectly manicured hand. Up close, I could see that her beauty was carefully constructed expensive makeup, professional hairstyling, a dress that probably cost more than my car. "Congratulations," I said, my voice flat. "Thank you." Victoria took a sip of her wine, studying me like I was an insect under glass. "I wanted to talk to you about your future with the company." "My future," I laughed bitterly. "I assumed I didn't have one." "Don't be so dramatic," Victoria said, waving her hand dismissively. "Of course you have a future here. I'm keeping you on as, what was your title? Operations manager." The way she said it made the position sound like janitor. "However," Victoria continued, "things are going to change around here. My father was too soft, too trusting. Under my leadership, there will be stricter oversight. Every decision you make will require my approval. Every strategy, every client meeting, every expense report, I want to review it all personally." "That's insane," I said before I could stop myself. "It will slow everything down. The company's success depends on quick decisions and rapid adaptation." Victoria's smile hardened into something cruel. "I didn't ask for your opinion, Sarah. I'm telling you how things will be. You can accept it, or you can clean out your desk. Your choice." The threat hung between us like a knife. After everything I had done, this child was threatening to fire me. "I understand," I said through gritted teeth. though what I really understood was that I hated her with every fiber of my being. Good, I'm so glad we understand each other. Victoria patted my shoulder in a gesture that felt like a slap. Welcome to the new Blackwood Industries. She walked back inside, leaving me alone with my rage and my shattered dreams. That night, driving home through the empty streets, I cried for the first time in years. I cried for my wasted decade, for my lost marriage, for my daughter who barely knew me. I cried until there were no tears left, only a cold, hard anger that settled in my chest like ice. I didn't know it then, but that anger would lead me down a dark path, a path that would blur the line between the living and the dead. The next 3 months were torture. Victoria made my life a living nightmare. Every idea I presented, she rejected. Every strategy I developed, she claimed as her own. She would make me wait days for approval on urgent matters, causing us to lose clients and opportunities. But worse than the professional humiliation was the personal cruelty. Victoria seemed to take pleasure in reminding me that she was young, beautiful, and powerful while I was getting old and past my prime. I was only 42, but she made me feel ancient. My assistant, a young man named Daniel Park, was one of the few people who still treated me with respect. One evening, as we worked late in my office, he closed the door quietly and pulled out a folder. "Ms. Chen, I found something disturbing," he said, his voice low. "I've been tracking the company's finances like Victoria asked me to, and there's money missing." My exhaustion vanished, replaced by sharp attention. "What do you mean?" "Transfers to accounts I can't identify. They're labeled as consulting fees, but they don't match any of our actual consultants. So far, about $4 million has disappeared." $4 million. Victoria was stealing from her own father's company. "Are you certain?" I asked. Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "I've checked and rechecked. The money is definitely going somewhere it shouldn't." "Don't tell anyone about this," I said quickly. "Keep tracking the transfers, but be careful. If Victoria suspects you're watching her, she'll fire you or worse." "Okay," Daniel agreed, though he looked nervous. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." I admitted, "But keep records of everything." After Daniel left, I sat alone in my dark office, thinking. Victoria was embezzling from the company, and she was arrogant enough to believe she would never be caught. But I had caught her. I had evidence. The question was, what would I do with it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. And that's when I had the dream. I was standing in an old cemetery, fog swirling around ancient tombstones. The air was cold, so cold I could see my breath. In the distance, I heard a woman's voice calling my name. "Sarah, Sarah Chen." I turned toward the voice and saw a figure emerging from the fog. It was an old woman, her face lined with age, her eyes milky white and blind. She wore a traditional Chinese dress, the kind my grandmother used to wear. "Who are you?" I asked, though somehow I wasn't afraid. "I am Li Mei," the woman said. "I have been waiting for you." "Waiting for me? Why?" The old woman smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too white. "Because you seek revenge, because your heart is full of darkness and anger, because you are ready to walk the shadow path." "I don't understand," I said. Li Mei reached out with a withered hand and touched my forehead. Her fingers were ice cold, and where she touched me, I felt something like electricity surge through my body. "There is an old magic," she whispered. "A way to strike at your enemies without them knowing. A way to haunt them, to torment them, to make them suffer as you have suffered. But it requires sacrifice. It requires you to give up a piece of your soul." "What kind of sacrifice?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You must become something between the living and the dead. A ghost that walks in daylight. You will have power, but you will also be changed. Once you begin this path, there is no turning back." I should have been terrified. I should have run away. But instead, I felt a dark excitement building in my chest. "How do I do it?" I asked. Li Mei smiled again, and this time her smile was terrible to see. Come to the old Chinatown temple on Spring Street. Come alone at midnight, 3 nights from now. Bring something that belongs to your enemy, something she has touched, something that carries her essence. And bring your hatred. Bring your rage. Those are the ingredients of the spell. And then, I asked. And then, Li Mei said, you will become a shadow. You will walk between worlds. And your enemies will know fear like they have never known before. I woke up suddenly, gasping for breath. My bedroom was still dark, the clock showing 4:17 a.m. It had just been a dream, I told myself. A weird, vivid dream brought on by stress and anger. But when I looked at my forehead in the bathroom mirror, I saw a small mark, a symbol that looked like an ancient Chinese character. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. My hand shook as I touched it. The symbol was cold under my fingers, colder than my skin should be. It hadn't been just a dream. I spent the next 3 days in a strange state, half believing, half doubting what had happened. The mark on my forehead faded during the day, but reappeared each night when I looked in the mirror. I researched everything I could find about Chinese ghosts and spirits, about old magic and curses. Most of what I found was folklore and superstition, but some of it felt true. Stories about people who had been wronged seeking revenge through supernatural means. Tales of ghost brides and hungry spirits who walked between the worlds of the living and the dead. I knew I should forget about it. I should focus on exposing Victoria's embezzlement through legal means. But the rational part of my mind was growing quieter, drowned out by the anger that burned inside me like a dark flame. On the 3rd night, I found myself driving to Chinatown. The old temple on Spring Street was exactly where Li Mei had said it would be, a crumbling building squeezed between a noodle shop and a dry cleaner. Most people probably walked past it every day without noticing it. I parked my car and sat for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. This was insane. I was a businesswoman, a rational person. I didn't believe in ghosts or magic or curses. But then I thought about Victoria's smug smile. I thought about Richard's betrayal. I thought about my wasted years and my lost family, and I got out of the car. The temple's door was unlocked, creaking open when I pushed it. Inside, the air smelled of incense and dust. Red candles flickered in the darkness, casting strange shadows on the walls. Ancient statues of gods and demons stared down at me with blank eyes. "You came," a voice said from the shadows. Li Mei stepped into the candlelight. She looked exactly as she had in my dream, ancient, blind, and somehow terrifying. "I came," I confirmed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Did you bring what I asked for?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a silk scarf. Victoria had left it in the conference room after a meeting, and I had taken it. The fabric still carried her expensive perfume. Li Mei took the scarf and brought it to her nose, inhaling deeply. "Yes," she hissed. "I can smell her arrogance, her cruelty, her greed. This will do nicely." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we perform the ritual." Li Mei gestured to a circle drawn on the floor in what looked like chalk or maybe ash. "Step into the circle." I hesitated for just a moment, then stepped forward. As soon as I crossed the line, I felt something change in the air. The temperature dropped, and the candle flames flickered wildly. Li Mei began to chant in Chinese, words I didn't understand, but that sent shivers down my spine. She took the scarf and held it over one of the candles. The fabric caught fire, burning with strange blue flames that gave off no heat. "Sarah Chen," Li Mei intoned, "do you willingly walk the shadow path? Do you accept the price of power? Do you give up your claim to peace and innocence in exchange for vengeance?" Every rational instinct screamed at me to run, to leave, to forget this madness. But the anger in my heart was stronger than reason. "Yes," I whispered, "I accept." Li Mei smiled her terrible smile and threw something into the blue flames, a powder that made the fire explode upward in a column of light. The light wrapped around me like a cocoon, and I felt something inside me crack open, like an egg hatching. Pain shot through my body. I screamed, falling to my knees. It felt like my soul was being torn in half, one part remaining human while the other part became something else. Something cold, something dark, something hungry. When the pain finally subsided, I lay gasping on the floor. Li Mei knelt beside me, and when she touched my forehead, I realized she wasn't blind after all. Her eyes were perfectly clear, perfectly knowing, and filled with an ancient malice. "It is done," she said. "You are now a hungry shadow, neither fully alive nor completely dead. During the day, you will appear normal, but at night, you can shed your flesh and become spirit. You can walk through walls, enter dreams, and plant fear in the hearts of your enemies. But remember, the more you use this power, the less human you become. Eventually, you may lose yourself entirely to the darkness." "I don't care," I said, and I was horrified to realize I meant it. "I just want them to suffer." "And suffer they will," Li Mei promised. "But be careful, Sarah Chen. Revenge is a poison that kills the one who drinks it. You may destroy your enemies, but you may also destroy yourself." She vanished then, simply disappeared like smoke. I was alone in the temple with only the flickering candles for company. I left the temple and drove home in a daze. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw that my reflection had changed. My eyes seemed darker, colder. My skin was paler. I looked like myself, but also like something else. The transformation had begun. I tested my new abilities carefully over the next few days. I discovered that when night fell, I could separate my spirit from my body. It was a strange sensation, like slipping out of a coat. My physical body would lie still, barely breathing, while my spirit self could move freely. In spirit form, I could pass through walls like they were made of mist. I could become invisible when I wanted, or I could appear as a shadowy figure. I could enter people's dreams and shape them into nightmares. And I could sense emotions, fear especially tasted like honey on my tongue, sweet and intoxicating. The old woman had been right. The more I used these powers, the more I craved them. The more human warmth drained from my body, replaced by something cold and hungry. But I didn't care. I had a mission. On the 7th night after the ritual, I visited Victoria Blackwood for the first time. Her penthouse apartment was exactly what I expected: expensive, modern, and soulless. Glass and steel and designer furniture that looked uncomfortable. I passed through her locked door like it wasn't there, and found her asleep in her massive bed, her blonde hair spread across silk pillows. For a moment, I just watched her sleep, feeling the anger build inside me. She looked so peaceful, so content. She had stolen my life and felt no guilt at all. It was time to change that. I reached out with my spirit hand and touched her forehead. Instantly, I was inside her dream. She was at a party, surrounded by admirers, everyone telling her how brilliant and beautiful she was. A perfect fantasy for someone as narcissistic as Victoria. I began to change the dream. The faces of the admirers started to decay, their skin rotting and falling off to reveal skulls beneath. Their voices turned from praise to accusations. "Thief! Liar! Fraud!" Victoria tried to run, but her feet stuck to the floor. The corpses pressed closer, reaching for her with skeletal hands. "Who are you?" she screamed into the darkness. "What do you want?" I appeared before her in the dream, but not as myself. I wore a traditional Chinese funeral dress, all white, my face painted like a corpse. My eyes were black holes, empty and endless. "I am the ghost of your sins," I said, my voice echoing like it came from the bottom of a well. "I am everything you have stolen. I am everyone you have wronged, and I have come to collect what you owe." Victoria screamed, and screamed, and screamed. I withdrew from her dream and watched as she jerked awake, gasping and crying. She grabbed her phone and turned on every light in her apartment, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the device. I smiled. This was just the beginning. Over the next 2 months, I haunted Victoria relentlessly. Every night, I visited her dreams, turning them into nightmares. Sometimes I appeared as a corpse. Sometimes as a shadow with too many arms. Sometimes I just created an overwhelming sense of dread, making her dream that she was being watched by something terrible. Victoria began to fall apart. She came to work with dark circles under her eyes, her designer clothes hanging loose on her shrinking frame. She jumped at shadows and flinched at sudden noises. She started making mistakes, big ones, that cost the company money and reputation. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The darkness inside me had grown so strong that tormenting Victoria was like a drug I couldn't resist. I also began to haunt her father, Richard Blackwood. He deserved to suffer too, after all. He was the one who had betrayed me first. His nightmares were different. I made him dream that his company was burning, that everything he had built was turning to ash in his hands. I made him dream that his precious daughter had become a monster. During the day, I went to work as usual, playing the role of loyal operations manager. But I felt disconnected from the living world, like I was watching everything through a sheet of glass. Food had no taste. Music had no melody. The only thing that made me feel alive was haunting my enemies at night. Daniel noticed the change in me. "Ms. Chen, are you okay?" he asked one day, his voice concerned. "You seem different lately, distant." "I'm fine," I lied, "just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was becoming more ghost than human, and part of me didn't care. The turning point came on a cold October night. I was in my spirit form, preparing to visit Victoria again, when I saw something that made me stop. Victoria was in her apartment, sitting on her bed with a bottle of sleeping pills in her hand. She was crying, her makeup smeared down her face, her blonde hair tangled and unwashed. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed to herself. "Every night the nightmares, every night that thing, I just want it to stop. I just want to sleep." She opened the pill bottle. Her hands shook as she poured pills into her palm. Too many pills, a fatal dose. And in that moment, watching her prepare to kill herself, something inside me broke. Or maybe it fixed. I saw Victoria not as a monster, but as a broken, scared young woman who had made terrible choices. I saw myself reflected in her, someone who had let anger and ambition destroy their humanity. If she died, her blood would be on my hands. I would be a murderer just as surely as if I had poisoned her myself. "No," I whispered, and I did something I hadn't done in months. I chose mercy. I materialized in front of her, but this time not as a terrifying ghost. I appeared as myself, Sarah Chen, the woman I had been before darkness consumed me. "Victoria," I said softly. She screamed and dropped the pills, scrambling backward on her bed. You're the ghost. You're the thing from my nightmares." "I'm not a ghost," I said. Though that wasn't entirely true anymore. "I'm Sarah Chen, and I'm the reason you've been having nightmares." "Sarah, but why?" "Because you stole my life," I said, and my voice broke. "You took everything I had worked for and acted like you deserved it. You treated me like I was worthless. And I was so angry that I made a terrible choice. I used dark magic to torment you, to make you suffer as I suffered. But I was wrong. Revenge hasn't made me feel better. It's only made me into something monstrous." Victoria stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Are you going to kill me?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not, but you need to hear the truth. You've been stealing from your father's company. Daniel and I have evidence of the embezzlement. And if you don't confess and try to make things right, I will expose you. Not through magic or ghosts, but through the law." I was just borrowing the money," Victoria said weakly. "I have debts. I was going to pay it back." "Borrowing?" I laughed bitterly. "Victoria, you've stolen $8 million. That's not borrowing, that's a felony." Victoria began to cry harder, her shoulders shaking. I know I messed up. Everything is falling apart. My father doesn't respect me. The board thinks I'm incompetent. I thought if I could make some quick money from investments, I could prove I'm not just his spoiled daughter. But everything I touch turns to disaster." For the first time, I felt something other than hatred for her. I felt pity. "You need to tell your father the truth," I said. "You need to confess what you've done and face the consequences. It's the only way to stop being haunted, both by me and by your own guilt." "And what about you?" Victoria asked, wiping her eyes. "What happens to you?" I looked down at my hands. They were translucent, barely solid. I was fatting, becoming more ghost with each passing moment. "I don't know," I admitted. I've done terrible things. I let my anger turn me into a monster. Maybe I'm beyond saving now. Maybe we both are, Victoria said quietly. Maybe we're both ghosts haunting each other. Epilogue, The Price of Darkness *. Victoria did confess to her father the next day. I wasn't there, but Daniel told me what happened. Richard Blackwood was devastated. He immediately removed Victoria as CEO and turned the evidence of her embezzlement over to the authorities. Victoria faced criminal charges, but because she cooperated and agreed to pay back the money, she received a reduced sentence, 3 years probation and community service instead of prison. Richard offered me the position of CEO, along with a 20% stake in the company and a formal apology. He acknowledged that I should have been recognized years ago, that he had been blind to my contributions. It should have been my moment of triumph, but I couldn't enjoy it. I had won, but the victory tasted like ashes. Because the old woman had been right. Revenge had poisoned me. I was still alive, but I was no longer fully human. Part of my soul remained trapped on the shadow path, neither living nor dead. At night, I could feel the darkness calling to me, tempting me to let go of my humanity entirely and become a full ghost. I saw Li Mei one more time, back at the temple in Chinatown. "Is there a way to undo what I've become?" I asked her desperately. She studied me with those ancient eyes. "Perhaps," she said slowly. "If you can find forgiveness both for those who wronged you and for yourself, you may be able to reclaim your humanity. But it will not be easy. The shadow path does not release its hold willingly." "How do I do it?" "You must make amends for what you have done. You must help those you have hurt. And you must learn to let go of your anger, even though it feels like the only thing keeping you alive." I left the temple with more questions than answers, but I knew what I had to do. I reached out to my ex-husband and my daughter Emily. I apologized for being absent, for choosing my career over family. I didn't expect forgiveness, but to my surprise, Emily agreed to have coffee with me. It was awkward and painful, but it was a beginning. I also helped Victoria. When she was released from court, struggling to find work and drowning in shame, I offered her a job not at Blackwood Industries, but at a nonprofit I was starting for women in business who had faced setbacks. She would help other women avoid the mistakes she had made. "Why are you helping me?" Victoria asked, confused. "After everything I did to you." "Because I've learned something important," I said. "Revenge doesn't heal wounds. It only creates new ones. If I want to reclaim my humanity, I have to start by being human again, by showing compassion even when it's hard, by choosing mercy over vengeance." Slowly, painfully, I began to heal. The darkness inside me didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. Some nights I could almost feel warm again, almost taste food, almost hear music. I learned that running a company with integrity and compassion was more satisfying than any revenge could ever be. I learned that helping others succeed was more fulfilling than destroying enemies. I learned that forgiveness, real, genuine forgiveness, is the most powerful magic of all. But the shadow path left its mark on me forever. On the darkest nights, I can still feel the cold place inside me where I let darkness in. I can still slip between worlds if I try. I am still haunted by what I became, by the line I crossed. And sometimes, late at night, I see Li Mei watching me from the shadows, her ancient eyes reminding me that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. I won my revenge. I got everything I thought I wanted. But I paid a price that can never be fully repaid, a piece of my soul that remains forever in darkness, a ghost that walks beside me wherever I go. That is the true cost of vengeance. That is the price you pay when you let anger turn you into something you were never meant to be. And it is a price I will carry with me for the rest of my life, however long or short that life may be.